In Birmingham, Alabama, on September 28, 1962, Dr. Martin Luther King was giving the closing speech of a 4-day annual meeting of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC. The auditorium was packed with 300 SCLC members, black religious leaders, civil rights leaders from all over the South who had organized and participated in numerous boycotts, protests, rallies, and marches, all of them conducted peacefully, following the leadership of Dr. King. Nearly everyone was dressed in their Sunday best, with the men wearing conservative dark suits, white shirts, formal ties. But in the sixth row that day sat Roy James, a 6'2", 200-pound white man who stood out, not only because of his color, but also because he was wearing a casual white t-shirt. The SCLC meeting was open to all. However, its members didn't know this man was the lieutenant stormtrooper of the American Nazi Party. And James grew angrier and angrier as Dr. King spoke. Finally, James couldn't take it anymore. He sprung from his seat, bolted onto the stage, and savagely slammed his right fist into Dr. King's left cheek, hitting the 5'7" civil rights leader so hard that it sent him backwards and partially spun him around. As James got ready to hit Dr. King again, King turned his face to his assailant, dropped his hands like a newborn baby, as one observer recalled, and looked his assailant in the eyes. This crowd of civil rights leaders watched in awe as Dr. King did as he had passed along from Jesus to Gandhi to turn the other cheek. James was also so stunned at Dr. King's reaction. For a second, the two men silently stared at each other. Then James went wildly after Dr. King and kept punching him in rapid fire as the audience screamed in horror, filling the now silent auditorium with the sickening sounds of bone connecting with flesh. Dr. King was bleeding profusely from the punches, his lips and face rapidly swelling, and his ears, neck, and back were aching from the punches that hit them there. Finally, the crowd reached the stage. James anticipated that these black men would beat him to a pulp. But immediately, Dr. King's voice rang out, "Don't touch him!" And then again, "Don't touch him! We have to pray for him." And no one harmed James. Instead, as Dr. King had asked, they prayed for him. And they prayed. Dr. King assured James that he wouldn't be harmed. And then he took James to a private room, and the two men calmly spoke. Dr. King finished his final closing comments at the conference as he held an ice pack to his face. Dr. King had already been threatened numerous times. His house had been bombed with his family in it, and he had been shot at, beaten, stabbed, and jailed. But most delegates hadn't seen it for themselves. But no one who witnessed that attack and Dr. King's response to it would ever forget what they saw. This bloody scene reinforced Dr. King's words of nonviolence, and it powered the leaders of the civil rights movement to return home. It helped them be resolute, and resilient in their marches, boycotts, and protests while remaining nonviolent. In Dr. King's words, nonviolence means avoiding external physical violence and internal violence of spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a man, but you refuse to hate him. Using nonviolence, the civil rights movement did overpower the bigotry and the vicious attacks to integrate America and establish equal rights under the law promised by the United States founders, many of them slaveholders themselves, nearly 200 years earlier, but they never honored themselves. Today, in the United States, we pay homage to Dr. King. He holds an esteemed place in our history books. It comes in part from that 1962 day when the civil rights leaders saw Dr. King bravely stand up for his principles. What do we take away from Dr. King today? To succeed requires that we stand up for our principles, not in words, but in deeds, not by explanation, but by our example, not when it's easy, but particularly when it's not. My Darren Daily friends, take out your Darren Daily journal. What does Dr. Martin Luther King's example inspire in you today? Where might you be better in demonstrating versus only pontificating in your core principles? And share that with us in the comments below.